Hi guys, welcome back. It's me, Teacher Gail, with God Heals to Her Ministries. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend a little time with me. I want to talk on the subject, the heart. Your heart is something that you have zero control over. Your emotions, your feelings, they all resonate from your heart. You know, there are so many things that happen around us that affect our heart to such an extreme that our mind can do nothing about it. When you're angry, when people are talking about you behind your back so much, you get to the point where if they say one more thing, you're subject to knock them into next week. Your heart is filled at this point with bitterness. When you have that peace, that enjoyment, the entertainment, the excitement, your heart leaps for joy. When someone betrays you, they stab you in your back, and you trusted them, your heart is broken. That's a horrible feeling. But the thing about it is you have no control over the heart. You can't control who you fall in love with. But you can control how you react in the situation where you are in love. You know, I think it's a horrible, horrible thing to be in a situation or a predicament where you are in love with someone and they don't love you. That's a hurting thing, and it's filled with heartbreak. And you can be in a relationship with someone who loves you, but they can't love you back the way you want to be loved because they are committed to somebody else. Woo! That heart is something else. Mine is fluttering just thinking about different scenarios where your heart is affected. Today we want to go to, if you don't have your Bibles, grab it, your iPad, your iPhone, whatever you have your Bible app on, because we're going to 1 Samuel today. We're going to be coming out of chapter 24, starting to read verse 1 through 6, and we're going to skip down just a little bit, and we're going to read verses 12 through probably around 17. But here's the thing. I want to talk about King David. This is what this is going to be talking about. You see, David was a young boy when God sent Samuel to anoint him as king. And the thing about it was, David was minding his own business. He was out taking care of his sheep in the wilderness or wherever he had them feeding. He was minding his own business. But can you imagine having a father who not only forgets you, but tends to leave you out of things? You know, it's one thing not having a father because he's never been there. But it's another thing to have a father who leaves you out. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. You see, when David was first anointed king, Samuel came to the house of Jesse, who was David's father, to choose one of his 8 sons to be anointed to be king. David was not there. He was out, taking care of his sheep. So the other 7 sons were there. So Samuel sanctified those 7 sons. And it seemed to me like he probably should have sent one of those sons out to get David and bring him back so that he could be sanctified as well, because they were about to do a sacrifice, which would have meant they were about to have a feast, because whatever they sacrificed to God, they ate. And so they're about to have this feast without David. he was left out. How many of you know how it feels to be left out? How many of you know how it feels for everybody else to be enjoying something and you not be included? Not because of what you did wrong, but because they just didn't want to include you. Then they're done, they got the t-shirt, know exactly how I feel. That affects the heart in such a tremendous way. And so here is Samuel with his vial of oil. He has this oil that he will pour on the head of Jesse's sons. Now the thing about it was, this is how God works. I don't care how Samuel poured this, he turned this vial upside down. If it's not the person that God chose to be king, that oil was not going to flow. We serve a God who controls gravity. The oil was in a picture, a vial. And when Samuel turned it upside down, it wouldn't come out. 7 of Jesse's sons were brought before Samuel so that he could find the king that would replace King Saul. And if you can envision this, each one of them holding their head down, excited, ready to be anointed king, and the oil didn't flow. And so by the time it got to the last son and it didn't flow, Samuel said, wait a minute now. Is this all your sons? Because see, Samuel knew that God had chosen one of Jesse's sons. And Jesse says, now, at this point, after all the 7 had failed the test, he now says, oh, well, my youngest one is out in the pastures with the sheep. And Samuel says, okay, send somebody to get him. And we will not sit down to eat until he get here. You see, God is going to make your enemy stand up until he gets ready to bless you. You know, people can try to dig graves to throw you in, but it does not matter, because what God has for you, you're going to get it. Whatever blessing God has in store for you, I don't care how much they stabbed you in your back. I don't care how much they talk behind your back. I don't care how much they try to betray you, trap you, beguile or trick you into falling into graves. It's not going to happen. Because see, when God get ready to bless you, they will have to stand until you get there to be blessed. And so all of them, the brothers and the daddy, had to stand there until they went out there in that pasture and brought David back. You see, the people who've been trying to trap you are going to be angry. They're going to be frustrated when God bless you in their face. So don't feel down and out right now about how people treated you or mistreated you, because there will be a time when God will elevate you in their face. And that was for somebody, I don't know who that was for. But so David was not his father's favorite like Joseph was, but yet he remained obedient. When his father told him to do something, he did just that. You see, people, we tend to believe in our hearts that when someone mistreats us, we're going to get them back. They're not going to treat me or talk to me in a kind of way and expect me to do what they want me to do. Well, this is his father. Some of your fathers or mothers have mistreated you in your eyes and done some things wrong to you in your eyes that you still have to forgive them for and be obedient. Some of you have children that has mistreated you, but it doesn't negate the fact that you still have to be a better parent than they were your child. You can't treat them the same way. Because see, ultimately, God sees all of our hearts. He knows exactly what we're dealing with, what we're going through, and He will definitely bring us through. And so when David came, the oil flowed, and God had a new king. He was anointed to be king. But what do when your blessing comes? You eat their meals, you have your feast, you celebrate, but then you have to go right back to the pasture to feed the sheep where you were. You see, God is a God that's strategic. David could not go directly to the throne because he was too young. He wasn't ready to go. But strategically, God lined that thing up for him. You see, Saul was messing up. Saul was disobeying God. And it was time, and Saul already knew that God had chosen somebody to replace him. But he just didn't know who it was. Here's the thing. When your enemy, and this is your enemy, come up against you, God always has His angels encamped around you to protect. At any rate, David goes back out in the pasture doing the same old things he's been doing. God is punishing Saul for being disobedient. God sends a demonic spirit. He gives the demonic spirit permission to torment Saul. You see, God has control even over the devil and his angels. A lot of times they torment you, but it's not just because they want to torment you. God is giving them permission. You see, Saul is being chastised for his disobedience, and so there's a spirit that's tormenting him. And then one of his servants say, well, you need some music that's going to make that demon go away. And immediately they think of David. They go pull David out the pasture. David plays his harp beautifully. And how many of you know that when you worship God, the enemy has to flee? This demon had permission, but when David started worshiping with that harp, the enemy fled, the demon left Saul. Still have to go back out into the field. Now, when it was time to slay Goliath, David's father called David out of the fields or the pasture, wherever he had his sheep, to take food to his brothers in the army, fighting for Saul. So David was obedient, and he did just that. So regardless of how people mistreat you, you still have to be respectful. And if they are above you, like a boss or a pastor, you still have to be obedient, and you go ahead and be obedient. So he was obedient. He went out. He took food to his brothers, and Goliath had the audacity to come out. This was not David's battle. It was God's battle. But God used David to defeat the enemy of Saul. So here David slays Goliath, and Saul brings him on as one of his soldiers in the army. And David is put in charge over the men of war. Here's a boy coming from the feeding the sheep and the pasture to leading an army. God is strategically preparing him to be king. He is in training. But how many of you know while you're in training, your heart is torn apart on so many different occasions? You see, David had the heart of a fighter, even though he was feeding sheep. Some of you may not be in that place where you want to be. You have a heart to be where you want to be. Be patient. There's a strategy going on here. There are procedures. Go through God's procedures to get you where He needs for you to be. So David becomes a great warrior. He's leading Saul's army. And then coming back from defeating the Philistines, there's a parade of women and they're shouting, Saul has killed thousands, but David has killed 10,000. Oh man, the hater in Saul came out, the high beams came on. He said, this is truly my replacement. He already knew God had somebody to replace him. But when those women started praising David more than him, he knew. That demon that had been hunting him made sure he knew. So now he has it in for David. When the demon attacks him, David comes to play music. He don't even give David a chance. That demon didn't give David a chance to run it away. He threw a spear and tried to kill David. And if it had not been for God, then David would have probably been stabbed with this spear. David jumped out of the way, and the spear missed him, and David ran. Many times, Saul tried to kill David. And now we're going to go to 1 Samuel chapter 24, and we're going to start reading, because this is one of the times when Saul wanted to kill David. Verse 1. When Saul returned from following the Philistines, he was told, behold, David is in the wilderness of En-gedi. Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men out of all Israel and went to seek David and his men among the rocks and the wild goats. He came to the sheepfold on the way where there was a cave, and Saul went in, and King James says he went in to relieve him, to cover his feet. But NIV, this is NIV I'm reading, says he went in to relieve himself. Now David and his men were sitting in the back of the cave, in the innermost recesses of the cave. In verse 4, David's men said to him, behold, the day of which the Lord said to you, behold, I will deliver your enemy into your hands, and you shall do to him as seemed good to you. Then David arose and stealthily cut off the skirt of Saul's robe. So he quietly crept over to Saul while he was using the bathroom, and he cut off the end of his robe, and quietly he slipped away. And verse 5 says, afterward David's heart smote him because he had cut off Saul's skirt. So in other words, David felt guilty because he knew that Saul had been anointed by God, and here he was cutting off his robe. He felt guilty just for cutting off his robe, and this man was trying to kill him. Verse 6, and he said to his men, the Lord forbid that I should do this to my master, the Lord's anointed, to put my hand out against him, when he is anointed of the Lord. Now we're going to skip down. We're going to go down to verse 12. And this is David. He says, may the Lord judge between me and you, and may the Lord avenge me upon you, but my hand shall not be upon you. As the Proverbs of the ancient says, out of the wicked comes forth wickedness, but my hand shall not be against you. In other words, David is saying, you being wicked toward me, but I'm not a wicked person. I don't have a wicked heart. I'm not going to retaliate, and I'm not going to do the same thing to you or show you the same favor that you're showing to me. I'm not going to try to hurt you because you're trying to hurt me. This is what David said. And when verse 14 says, after whom has the king of Israel come out? After whom do you pursue? After a dead dog? After a flea? May the Lord judge and judge between me and you, and see and plead my cause, and deliver me out of your hand. And when David had said this to Saul, Saul said, is this your voice, my son David? And Saul lifted up his voice and wept. We're going to stop right there. God will make your enemies cry because they had done you wrong and you did not do them wrong. You see, you can catch more flies with honey than you can with vinegar. Saul knew David could have killed him. But he also realized at this point that God was with David and that God was protecting David. I'm here to tell you today that that same God who's protected David is protecting you. And the same God who kept David from killing Saul is keeping you from knocking that enemy into next week. Regardless of what they did to you. I know they dejected you, made you feel dejected. Rejected you, mistreated you, stabbed you in your back, were not there for you even though you were there for them. Those things that they did wrong, God don't want you to do to them, because if you do, you tie the wings of your angels. If you retaliate for yourself, what do you need God to retaliate for? Why do you need him to avenge you? Because you have already avenged yourself. Even with the words of your mouth, sometimes you can just stab them back with your mouth. And you have to be careful. Be careful the words that come out of your mouth. I'm still learning. Lord knows he's working on me. Because I have said some things I can't take back. And I've asked God to forgive me, and I've repented. And some of us need to just do the same thing. Regardless of what they say. You know, it's not what they call you or what they say about you. It's what you answer to and how you react to what they say. This is Teacher Gail from God Heals the Hurt Ministries. I want you to know that David had the heart of a king. Even though Saul tried to murder him, Saul tried to break his heart by taking his wife away from him. Saul did some low-down things to David. David did not retaliate. He did not treat Saul the way Saul treated him. He said, "May the Lord judge between me and you and avenge me." And that is exactly what happened. Saul was killed years later, but it was not by the hand of David. It was by God himself. God allowed him to go out to fight the Philistines and allowed the Philistines to take him out. That's what God would do for your enemy if you forgive. Because as long as you hold on to that animosity, that hate, that bitterness, that unforgiveness, that frustration, truly you're hurting yourself. You're not hurting that other person. But you're also tying the wings of your angels, the warring angels that fight for you. Forgive that person. Breathe it out. Release that load and free your angels to fight the battles for you. This is Teacher Gail from God Heals the Hurt Ministries. Thank you for joining me. I will see you at my next video. Hit that subscribe button and that notification bell. Have a blessed rest of your week. Bye.